This is the Athletic Football Show.
Welcome to the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays. Joining me today, it's longtime NFL quarterback Chase Danielle. Chase, how you doing, man?
Good. It's been a while. We're doing a live show for the first time. I know you guys have been killing it. You and Nate the first 2 days, and literally free agency starts in 50 some odd minutes. So yeah, this is exciting. It's like I was doing another show the other day, and someone mentioned to me, March Madness really isn't about basketball. Like, it's football year round. And some of these contracts, I mean, there's been like $2 billion worth of contracts signed so far. So it just shows you that the NFL never sleeps, man, like ever. So I'm excited to get going.
It really doesn't. And obviously real free agency, technical free agency, when these deals can actually become official, starts in about an hour. When I started doing this show, it was 2021 was our first spring. And I was looking at the calendar. I was like, oh, free agency starts on Wednesday. That's when we'll do our first free agency recap show on Wednesday. No. And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, wait a second, isn't all this stuff going to start happening on Monday? So I've learned my lesson over the years. And even as we title the shows in the feed, like, it's free agency recap day one. I don't care about tampering period or when the actual calendar says that free agency starts. This is free agency week. All the bylaws be damned.
Yeah, I mean, and really it starts at the combine. Let's be real. That's when a lot of these deals get done, not officially, because that would be tampering, and we don't want to tamper. But let's be real, like, let's call a spade a spade. That's when it happens. And yeah, this, they implemented this legal tampering window, man, I want to say like 6 years ago. I'm not exactly sure when they did it, but I remember a time when there was no such thing. And when I was a free agent, and deals were done. Like, it was like a handshake deal. Like, hey, you better get on the bus. You're going to miss it, especially with backup quarterbacks, because it was just like, dude, we got to hurry up and roll. You got to pick a spot because they're all going to get filled up. There's 5 to 7 backup spots a year that are available that really will pay. So I was like, all right. And then you do that. And I remember like the first year without it, or like the year right before the legal tampering window, on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, which is the start of free agency today. I mean, the insiders, all the guys on Twitter, I'm telling you, they dropped
25 signings a piece stacked up at that point.
They dropped at least 100 signings because they had all these scheduled tweets that their platforms helped them tweet. I remember Adam Schefter, it was like a tweet a minute for like 2 hours announcing all these deals. And I think that's when the league was like, all right, like, let's do something else about this to spread it out, to take more room up on the calendar, to have more people like us talking about it, to just widen their spread on the NFL. And here's what we're doing. We're doing a live show because it is technically the start of the new league year in 53 minutes.
Wait till we get tampering week. Wait till they realize that if they just decide to move it up a week, that they can own the entire news cycle for the first week in March, along with the actual free agency week. It's only a matter of time before the tampering period lasts a month and before we have NFL games 6 days of the week. But we are slowly getting to that point, but we are going to get there. Don't you fear.
Oh, no doubt. We already have a Friday game in Brazil. So that's another day of the week that they're wanting to take. And look, I can't imagine. I'm sure you heard the news, right? Fox is having this primetime college game on Friday because they're getting rid of WWE, or they're moving Raw or whatever it is that's on Friday. High school associations weren't happy with it, but I guarantee you the NFL wasn't happy about it because they just dropped that they're playing in Brazil. The Eagles are playing in Brazil opening weekend on Friday night. So that'll be an interesting dynamic. Like you said, there will be football multiple days out of the week. Schedule, who cares about it? Guys, who cares about it? Injuries, who cares about it? You're playing 6 days a week. I would not be surprised.
We're going to have that conversation at some point this offseason about player safety and about messaging from the league. Let's get into some of these signings, though. There have been some big ones since we signed off yesterday, and that starts with Danielle Hunter going to the Houston Texans. 2 years, $49 million, 48 of that guaranteed. So essentially a fully guaranteed deal for Danielle Hunter. Okay. Only 2 years. So now on top of getting $50 million fully guaranteed, essentially, he's going to be able to hit free agency again at age 31. So there's a chance he gets to cash in again. With this deal, he's going to have made $143 million playing in the NFL. And there's a chance he gets another contract after this. Ooh. I knew he'd have a market, but this sort of market is kind of ridiculous. The only other player in the NFL, defensive player, who has an almost fully guaranteed short-term contract at this age is Aaron Donald. That's it.
Pretty good.
So I think this says a lot about how rare a player he was to hit free agency and what the Texans thought of him in this process.
Well, I'm just surprised. First of all, like, why didn't they give him the extra $1 million to be fully guaranteed? Like,
I assume it's so it wasn't fully guaranteed. That'd be my assumption.
But like at the same deal, it is. So like you're trying not to set a precedent, but like there already was a precedent on quarterback. So I guess they don't want him to be the only one.
Well, Donald's deal was fully guaranteed as well, I believe.
Which like it's crazy to me. Like just it like you're talking about. That's what pisses me off. Like we'll get like that's what pisses me off about some owners and some teams is like we don't want to do it just to say we were the first one to do it. Like. You gave him technically pretty much a fully guaranteed deal. Why not add the extra $1 million? Sorry, I just come off my soapbox because I've been a part of the PA. I mean, we've had conversations like this. Like I don't.
It is very silly. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
No, not at all. Anyway, I mean, DeMeco Ryans. First of all, they're having a wonderful free agency. Like they really are. And to add a guy like Danielle Hunter is special. Because you got a different guy opposite of Will Anderson Jr., right? So you're not going to be putting your best guy on Will Anderson Jr. at all times. And I just look back to like my time with the Saints when we were playing the 49ers, when they were rolling on the edge. And I know they weren't part of it, but like this just brings back like shades of like, hey, you just can't have enough pass rushers. You're seeing what the 49ers are doing right now, just continually adding pass rushers, right? Like, I don't care about, like, that's the, like, I feel like the motto that coach is doing, man, and just bringing these guys in. And, I mean, they're going to get after the passer. I mean, they're a 4-down team. It fits Hunter perfectly. And I'm just excited to see him, like go out and play in this scheme because this scheme, this 49ers scheme is, I mean, literally they tell the edge guys to just pin your ears back and rush the passer every single snap.
Yeah, you play the run on your way to the quarterback.
Exactly. I don't care about screens. I don't care about draws. And honestly, at the end of the day, through 3 quarters or 4 quarters as a quarterback, you're like, these guys just won't stop. Yes, he's a really good passer, but his motor is insane. Like he keeps going. I'm surprised the Vikings let him go because they obviously had the money now that Kirk is in Atlanta.
I think that's worth looking at, right? So we had a pass rusher swap. Jonathan Grenard goes to Minnesota and Danielle Hunter goes to the Texans. And I think that actually says a lot about where these teams are. Minnesota understands, all right, we're probably going to add a young quarterback maybe in this year's draft. We're slow playing a little bit. We want a little bit of a longer runway with the pieces that we're signing in free agency. The message the Texans are sending with this contract specifically, but I also think with the overall level of aggressiveness they've shown this week is we think we can win a Super Bowl in the next 2 years.
On a rookie quarterback.
We know how good our quarterback is. We're not paying him anything. There's a chance we get borderline top 5 quarterback play for rookie quarterback money over the next 2 to 3 seasons. We are pushing it all in right now, and not in an irresponsible way, but just understanding that we have a real Super Bowl window to do this. And that's the swap and the upgrade short term for Hunter over Grenard, I think says a lot about the thinking of these two teams.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I think Hunter's a much better, like pure pass rusher, like nothing against,
he's a more dynamic player. I mean, he just is
like without a doubt. And look, led the league in sacks. And the thing that I love that the Texans are saying is like, you talk about all the time, or we talk about all the time, like, hey, the Super Bowl window on a rookie quarterback deal. Like like you said, they're paying him nothing, CJ, nothing. And it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out because look, now that we're into day 3 of free agency, like I know this deal got done, but you're going to start seeing some other pieces added for teams that are really wanting to win now and not necessarily, hey, draft a guy. They can do both, but also make him sit or develop him or stuff like this. And I just think the Texans surprised so many people, probably themselves last year, on like how good of a roster they had. And to add a stud at the pass rusher position that can literally, like, I remember offensive coordinators that I played for, specifically Andy Reid and really the head coach, but his whole thing when we were playing elite pass rushers was like, first of all, we're going to spend way more time game planning for them. Second of all, we are going to take a running back and chip them. Okay, so you take the running back out of the route, and then third, the only thing you cannot do to lose this game is sack fumble, and that's the only thing on Andy's mind. And like literally one sack, strip sack, fumble can change the game. And it's just crazy to me that these edge rushers are getting this money, but it's obviously worth it. And then, I mean, look, I love all these guys like getting all this money. There's been $300 or $400 million contracts. Like, kudos, because people don't understand. like, okay, it might say like Kirk Cousins $180 million deal. Okay, the number you want to pay attention to is the guarantee. And and reader beware, not just the guarantee. There's three parts of a guarantee. Okay, it's injury, cap, and skill. The cap and skill are fully guaranteed the second you sign the contract. The injury is different. So for Kirk, he has a $90 million full guarantee with a $10 million injury guarantee. Pretty much it's $100 million, but there's all these agents out there that are feeding these insiders and they want their names attached to it. Just beware on what you hear. Now, there's a lot of really good deals. Most of these 4-year deals are 2-year deals. Rarely does a stud player, unlike a pass rusher or a quarterback, get anything more than half of their contract guaranteed. So that's really what you're going to look at. And I love this for Hunter because, like you said, he hits the free agent market when he's 31.
Just practically, I was looking at the numbers while you were talking. Okay, CJ Stroud over the next 2 seasons, 24 and 25, will count for about $18 million against the cap. Baker Mayfield on his extension will count for $50 million against the cap. So we're talking $30 million in savings for the Texans over the next 2 seasons for, again, what I believe could be upwards of top 5 quarterback play. And that's why you see the urgency to really try to make something happen. And along with Hunter, Danielle Autry is now there. Azeez Al-Shaair. They got Foley Fatukasi. They traded Malik Collins today. So there's potentially another move on the horizon. But the other thing about the Hunter deal, the last thing I want to say about this is last year he played 1,000 snaps for the Vikings. The second most snaps of any edge rusher in the NFL. The only guy who played more than him was Max Crosby. That is not going to be the case playing in Houston. That's not how they want to play their guys. So that number is probably going to be 800, maybe
700, 800. Yeah.
So
they're like full on line shifts.
You're hoping that you can get even more per down explosiveness and disruption out of him if he's playing a few less snaps. So I completely understand the thinking, and I get why he'd want to go to a place like that where there's not going to be quite as much mileage on his tires, because even though he's 29, he's been in the league for 8 years. He's played a lot of football because he came into the league so young. So I think this makes sense for him and for them.
Yeah. But also, like, I want to say one more thing, like, just from a player's perspective, when you're the Texans and you get a playoff win and you're really close against the Ravens to upsetting them, and you got a CJ Stroud, you got D'Amico Ryans. We've talked about it ad nauseum on this show, how those two have changed an organization for the next decade. I mean, just 2 guys. Okay. But when you're a player on that team and you saw what you did last year, and then most of these guys are at home just following on their phone. Like, who are we signing? They have no clue. I know offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators in the NFL right now that have no idea who they're signing. It comes down to owners and head coaches and who they can afford. Like, legitimately, I was texting with an OC the other day, and I'm like, hey, you're interested in so-and-so, this quarterback? He's like, oh, really? Well, thanks for telling me, because I haven't been talked to at all. That's normal. I just want people to understand that. But
I had lunch with an offensive coordinator during the combine, and we were talking about stuff like that. I was like, what are you guys going to do? And he's just like, I don't know.
He has no clue. And
it would be great if we did this and this and this, but I don't know what we're going to do.
Oh my gosh. It's first of all, that's wild to me, but that's just how the NFL works. Second of all, if you're
right, that's how some teams work, not all. There's some staffs are more involved in those decisions, etc. But there are teams where there's a pretty hard dividing line.
Yeah. And then, so anyway, sorry, I'm just making point after point. But if you're a player at home that plays for the Texans and you see the free agency they're having, like, capitalized by this Hunter signing, you're like saying, oh my God, like we are all in. And there's just a feeling amongst the team that, like, hey, we're not settling for just a playoff win. Like, that invigorates some guys, especially some veteran guys, because I've been a part of a team where they haven't really done anything in free agency, and they're like, oh, we'll just draft. And it's like, oh, okay, ho-hum. Like, we're just going to do the same thing over and over. And I've been part of some teams where they've tried to build like very aggressively, and they haven't been super aggressive. This is a really nice deal for a really good player. But just from a standpoint of thinking from a player's perspective that's at home, that's maybe on a 3-year deal, that's looking at this, like, you are freaking pumped up.
I can totally understand that. And I think that's the general vibe down there, period. I mean, what they needed to do is they needed to beef up that defense after what we saw last year, because that was a group that they just hadn't invested that much in. You know, but you had Nico Collins develop, you had Tank Dell come in there. They added some cheaper pieces on offense last year to give CJ Stroud a chance. The offensive line was banged up, but they still have most of those guys coming back. And when they're healthy, it's going to be a different looking group. Defense was the question. And I think that they have answered a lot of what we wanted to see from them on that side of the ball. And it's easy to get excited about it. Other big move from last night that we did not hit on yesterday's show. Big trade. Interesting trade. The Steelers send Deontay Johnson to Carolina for Dante Jackson, the cornerback. Yeah, some picks involved, but not really. I mean, for the most part, it's a player for player sort of deal. Whose side of this trade do you like better after sitting back and looking at it?
Oh, I love the Carolina standpoint of it. I mean, you're getting a legitimate, like, number one, and he's young enough. I know the Panthers, like, are probably, I mean, look, the biggest thing when watching film, right? I can only tell you what I see watching film. Other than Thielen, who isn't really a separator, he's more of a route technician who gets open in the slot. They had nobody with separation. I mean, it was mind-blowing as a quarterback to sit back and, like, everyone wants to blame Bryce Young, which Bryce made some bad decisions. There was nowhere to throw the football. So you bring this guy in and you watch his film and you see what he does well. He's a separator. He's fast. He gets open. I don't understand. I mean, I don't understand fully why in Pittsburgh that you're trading a guy like this, because I do think just from on the field, I know he's got some off-field stuff, purely on field, like, the dude has some juice. So he steps in to the Panthers offense as a true number one. And you look at what the head coach of the Panthers did with Tampa and those receivers. Like, I love this fit because I just think it's like, you got to have juice as a quarterback. And then you have Thielen as a slot guy. You're probably going to pick another one of these receivers. Like, what do they pick at 33?
Well, they have 33 and 39 after the Brian Burns trade. So
I think you still take a guy there because the receiver draft is so big and so much depth in this receiver draft. You're going to get a good guy. And it might be like an Xavier Worthy or an Adonai Mitchell or someone like that, who I love. But it's a great move because they had no weapons, bro. Like, you watch and everyone watched. It's like, well, you're throwing into tight windows every single time. You can't play quarterback like that.
Everything they've done over the last few days is a signal that we are going to spend our resources trying to get everything we can out of Bryce Young. I don't know how it's going to work, but that's what we're going to do. And trading Deontay Johnson for Dante Jackson is exactly that. And what they did is they made that trade, and then they signed Dane Jackson in free agency today. So even if that's quote unquote a downgrade from what Dante Jackson was giving you at one of those outside corner spots, who cares? Yeah. That's the trade-off you're willing to make. And the same thing goes with the Brian Burns trade. Listen, they mishandled this every single step of the way, not dealing Burns when they could have a couple years ago. But the thought process of, all right, we'll get a 2 for him. And then, like you said, we could potentially use that pick to pick a receiver. Deontay Johnson's in the last year of his contract, just using all of your, and then the 2 guards that they signed, using all of your resources to build up that side of the ball and potentially just give your quarterback a shot. I think that is the right approach here if you're Carolina, because after everything you gave up for Bryce Young, if he fails, none of the rest of the shit matters.
You're all fired. All fired.
You have to do everything you can to prop him up, and that's clearly what they've done. And I think what you said about Deontay Johnson is right. His main appeal is separation. and they could not create separation last year. On Pittsburgh's side of this, just reading the tea leaves, this seems like they wanted to get rid of a guy they'd soured on, and we might as well get a starting caliber corner in return. Now they have a second starting cornerback. They can, not necessarily have to chase it in free agency and the draft as much as they could have. But in terms of on-field impact, the quality of these two players, the Panthers got a better one and one that aligns with, I think, their needs at this moment more than the Steelers did.
And then you talk about the Steelers side of it. Like I go, okay, you soured on them, but dude, your defense, you don't need more defense. You don't need more defense. Like you don't.
They needed another starting corner.
Dude, their defense is good. Their offense has been the issue that has been holding them back the entire time since Ben Roethlisberger's been gone. And that's the issue. You go out and get Russell for $1.21 million, which is an insane steal, and you don't sign with the Steelers unless you were promised a starting job. I don't care what anyone else says out there. You have multiple other places you could go. I guarantee you Tomlin's like, all right, look, we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. You're going to have to play well. We want to make sure your baggage is checked at the door. We don't want none of that in this locker room because we got a good locker room. We can handle it. But you're trading away. You're giving away a good weapon. Now, they're going to have to draft some people.
So that's the pivot, right? Now that they have the 20th overall pick, I think a lot of people were thinking that they may try to get a tackle, but Dan Moore, who started for them last year, is still there. So now it seems like receiver might be the way they have to go.
Yeah, and if I'm Russell,
first 2 rounds.
If I'm Russell, I'm looking at Pickens and Johnson on the. I'm like, dude, this is sweet. This is why I signed, and I guarantee you they told him. But still, I'm like, you're getting one less weapon as a quarterback. It freaks me out. And yeah, you might draft a good receiver at 20, but no one knows if he's going to be ready to play right away. So it's just a little bit puzzling. I know they soured on him. I know they wanted to go, but like Carolina finally got a W in free agency.
You look at it right now, outside of Pickens, the receivers on the Steelers roster, Calvin Johnson, my God, it's late in the week. Calvin Austin.
I was like, Calvin Johnson came out. He'd be better.
How old do you think Calvin Johnson is right now? Calvin Johnson's 38 right now. He's 38. Do you think Calvin Johnson would be the second best receiver on the Steelers right now?
Yes.
If he just came out of, I think he probably would be. But anyway,
tread on those stars. Yeah.
It's not Calvin Johnson. It's Calvin Austin, who the undersized speed guy they drafted in the 4th round a couple years ago. Then we got Dez Fitzpatrick, Denzel Mims, Marquez Callaway, Deuce Watts, and Kylon Harris.
Yeah,
those are the other
Russell Wilson. That's who
you're
you're walking into. That's what you're walking into right now is your Russell Wilson. So way to make your new shiny toy pissed off already because you're trading away a weapon.
They have the 20th overall pick, though. And I think there is renewed urgency to potentially go pass catcher with that pick because they probably need it at this point. Let's move on here. Let's talk about just some teams and some plans that you've liked or disliked here over the last few days. Is there a team that what they've done or their approach to this has just kind of made you shrug, shake your head, not really understand what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, also I have both. Like the first one, without a doubt, is the good, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Jason Light. Like he's absolutely crushed free agency. And today in his presser, he made it known that he crushed free agency. Like new deals for Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Levante David, kicker Chase McLaughlin, Greg Gaines, Chase Edmonds. They held on to Antoine Winfield Jr. With the franchise tag, and they got Jordan Whitehead. Like a lot of their own guys, and that's to me like two potential Hall of Famers there, Levante David, Mike Evans. Those are huge. And as soon as you saw Mike Evans come back, Baker was coming back. Like there's no doubt about it. Mike Evans had 10 or 9 straight 1,000 yard seasons.
Maybe 10 because he was drafted in 2014.
Yep. So like they won free agency. And like he said in his press conference, like I was listening to it right before we got on because I was like, this dude won free agency. He's like, it's time for the national media to take note that we have good players here. And I mean, if you would have told me at the start of last year that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were going to win a playoff game and almost go in and beat Detroit, truly, with Baker Mayfield on a $4 million salary, I would have said, you're crazy. I'll say you're not getting in the playoffs. You're going to win 6 games with the roster that they had. But it just seems to be coming back together and together. And then you keep the band together. You get all these other, like really a lot of your own guys back, which a lot of media people were talking, oh, you're going to lose this. Baker's maybe Patriots and all this stuff. you get your quarterback, man, and that's huge. That's huge for me. So that's probably the good. What about you? What about good for you?
Let's talk about the Bucs for a second.
Yeah.
I get it, right? You're excited about bringing the band back together. You were surprising last year. Baker was so much better than you thought he was going to be. But part of the reason that Baker was so valuable last year is that Baker was making $4 million. Okay. Now he's not making $4 million. So this Bucs team, with all these guys coming back, and I like Jordan Whitehead. I think that's a smart signing. You pair him with Antoine Winfield. You know, you can let Winfield do a bunch of different things. What do we think the actual ceiling for this Bucs team in 2024 is, with all these guys brought back and as currently constructed?
I mean, playoffs for sure. Like another playoff win if you get a home game. I don't know. I mean, they're not the favorite to win the South anymore because Kirk Cousins just went.
So that's kind of what I mean. If they're not even the favorite to win that division, what is all this for?
You would be, yeah. I mean, look. We can talk about free agency winners in March. It doesn't matter till football field in August. I got that. But at the same time, when you can build on something that you've had success with, and you can continue getting better and continue developing your young guys and get like the core nucleus together, like. There's a lot of change, man. Year in and year out on teams. The teams I've been on that have had the most success have been teams that have stayed together. And so I do think this is a W for Jason Light and the Bucs, and I do think it's a W. Look, you still have Baker, and I would say, yeah. Look, the value is Baker was making $4 million this year. Now he's making life-changing money this year, but he still played really well last year. Like I still think he can play that well this year. He's in same system for the first time in back-to-back years, and who knows how many. He's been in so many freaking systems. So I do like what's happening here. If they stay healthy, like I think it's going to be Atlanta and the Bucs in the South, and it's exciting time because I think for last year no one talked about them, and maybe this year we're talking about them, or I'm talking about them too much, and they're not going to do anything. But I like the way they're positioning their team right now in March.
I totally understand why they did all of this. And I think that them getting Evans and David back, and first of all, them losing either of those guys just would have felt wrong. Weird. I don't want to see either of those guys play in a different uniform. Levante David, especially, like Mike Evans, because he's still such a good player. If they didn't want him anymore, it would have been exciting to see him in a really good situation. But Levante David playing anywhere, yeah, exactly. But I'm fine with him staying because he's a lifetime Buck, and the same goes for Levante David. I just don't know what the end result is. Like, you're going to need to keep drafting well, and there's a chance that they do. It's a well-run organization. I think Jason Light and the people in that front office deserve a ton of credit for how they've handled the last 4 or 5 years, how they dismounted from the Tom Brady era, the financial difficulties that came along with that, them continuing to be competitive. They had a really good draft last year. I think they've done a lot of really good things. I just still have questions about what the ceiling of this team is and how many victory laps we should be taking about bringing the band back together when the ceiling of that band is, again, like maybe you win the NFC South again.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What do you think their ceiling is?
That's kind of what it seems like. And that's fine, right? Like that's what you should be trying to do. Yeah. And, you build a certain culture, and you can potentially move on from Baker after this year or next year if it doesn't work out. If you want to try to go seek out a young quarterback next offseason and have an off-ramp from the Baker Mayfield experience, which I think is probably the way you should handle quarterback situations like this. I get it. But I still think that the way that they're built, and with Baker at quarterback, even if it's a good story, you're looking at 10 wins as your best case scenario.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, 10 wins is good, but probably wins you maybe wins you the South. Depends on what they do in Atlanta. So can I say my bad?
You absolutely can.
The freaking Cowboys, dude. Like, you knew it was coming. What are they doing? Like the quote of the century, all in, comma, my ass. Like I don't get it. Like that was the quote of the century, dude. It was like Bayless for the win. But I just don't get it. Like the guy that they signed after Jerry Jones said they were all in and they decided to keep their head coach was a long snapper.
Hey, this is a pro long snapper show. I don't like that tone.
But it's still a long snapper. Like, you got to figure out, like, you got to replace Tony Pollard. You got to replace your left tackle. You got to redo Dak. Nothing has happened. Nothing. And maybe they're
what
being quiet
on the Dak
but
situation, because
mean,
looking at his contract coming
have
into
him in
this
handcuffs.
offseason, okay, he has a $59 million cap hit. It is very hard to do anything in free agency, let alone be aggressive. And the Cowboys rarely are, but even moves on the margins are difficult to make when you've got a $59 million cap hit for your quarterback. I always just assumed that they would do something to that contract to give them a little wiggle room heading into this year. What do you make of them not making any progress on figuring that out before free agency got started?
Well, I just think that the number's not high enough for Dak. I think they're going to extend him, and I think that he's going to be making in the upper 50s of the year, because literally, like, they didn't extend him a few years ago, and Dak was like, all right, Dak balled out, had the best year of his career. Now he's a cap hit for 59 million. 59 million. The dude could be making 60. I mean, I said it on this show, and I'll say the dude could be making 60 million APY, like, with his next contract. Like, quite honestly, because he holds the keys. Like he could do nothing right now, and the Cowboys would have to eat us almost $60 million cap hit. And like you said, they can't do it. So I don't know if Dak's playing hardball, or I don't know if the number in APY and guarantee is not high enough, but they're sort of, I mean, not sort of, they are cap strapped, and you also have some holes you got to figure out. Right? Like, that's the issue.
Yeah, we have multiple starters missing along the offensive line. They've lost a lot of depth on defense. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine a path where the 2024 Cowboys roster is anywhere close to as good or as complete as the 2023 Cowboys.
They lost a ton of guys to the Commanders with Dan Quinn, like a ton, which is usually the case. But yeah, I mean, they're not going to have the same. They're not going to have the same, like, wiggle room or roster or anything like that. But it all starts and ends with Dak. Like, if Dak doesn't want to do anything, he's sort of honestly hurting the Cowboys by waiting so long, because most of the guys are picked over and agreed to deals. And maybe they're like, hey, we have just a good enough, like, core nucleus that we're going to, like, sign some tier 2, tier 3 free agents, build through the draft, I don't know. I mean, who knows? That's the thing. Like, that they've been quiet. Like, they haven't leaked anything to anyone. No one knows anything about what they're doing. They don't even know if they're an NFL team still, because they've not been talked about one time except for the long snapper, which is wild to me.
They have a ton of cap space in 2025. Partially that's because that doesn't include Micah Parsons' fifth-year option, and CeeDee Lamb needs an extension as well.
CeeDee Lamb too, yeah.
But it just, I don't really understand what's going on. It's always felt to me like they would try to get the Dak thing figured out as soon as possible so they could have some flexibility. But clearly there are some hangups there, and we haven't heard much about it. But whatever the reason, this is not a good situation to be in for Dallas. And I'm not asking them to shop at the top of the market, but I think that if you look at which teams have been successful in recent years, there aren't that many teams anymore that just sit out free agency. You know, the Packers were quiet for a couple seasons as they were in transition, but you saw them jump in the fray again this year with Xavier McKinney. The Bengals are a team that had not traditionally spent a lot in free agency. That has gone away over the last few years. They've been good for a splash or two, essentially each of the last few off seasons. Teams that we generally think of as patient, well-run, smart, the Chiefs, the Ravens, those are teams that consistently are trying to get in the mix in free agency. The Chiefs just restructured Mahomes to save $20 million against the cap. I mean, there's a chance they bring back L'Jarius Sneed and keep doing this.
It's either for Sneed or a number one receiver.
So there you go. So it's some sort of big move. So all these other teams, even if we have written off or kind of even if we categorize free agency spending traditionally as misguided or not the best way to be successful, most of the teams that are winning Super Bowls or competing for them in the NFL are making aggressive moves. The Eagles, the Niners, the teams you're competing against in the NFC, they're trying to do everything they can to build the best roster possible. And the Cowboys can say anything they want about what sort of team they are and how aggressive they are and what their goals are. If we're being honest, that messaging and what they actually are, there's been a real disconnect between those two things for a few years now. And I don't really, it's strange to me. Like, I don't understand why Jerry Jones has this reputation as somebody who wants to win and, he's getting older and, it's so important to him. Like, give me any evidence that this is important to the Cowboys. And the most important thing isn't how much money do we get to count at the end of the year? Because that's what it seems like to me.
Well, I mean, every owner is like that, but especially Jerry. Yeah, I don't even have anything to add. That was amazing by you, and everything that I feel about the Dallas Cowboys signing a long snapper in free agency.
Well, hopefully that can move the needle for them as they compete against all these other teams in the NFC. Let's talk about some of the other dominoes we're still waiting to drop here as the league year is about to start. I think the big one is Calvin Ridley and what that decision ultimately looks like. Everything we've heard about the last couple days is that it's between the Jags and the Patriots. He wants to go back to Jacksonville, but does not want to sign there until the league year actually starts because it changes the draft pick that the Jags have to give up in that trade to Atlanta. So it really does feel like the fact that he has not landed somewhere yet gives us some indications that he's probably going to be back with the Jaguars here in the next couple hours.
Yeah. I mean, but like if you're a team like the Kansas City Chiefs and you have the best football player in all of history in Patrick Mahomes, like he sort of fits what they need. I'm not saying I've heard anything. I'm just purely speculating on like another reason why you may have not heard anything. And I know the Patriots are in it. I know Jacksonville's in it. I know the draft pick, but I've known the Chiefs to sort of sniff around in places where they usually don't belong and usually land some good players. And this would make all the sense in the world to me. I love it. It's probably not going to happen. So
I don't see
I'm just
I don't see them doing it. I think the price tag it's probably going to take. I would almost guarantee you.
Yeah. What do you think his APY is?
At least 20, right?
Yeah.
And I just don't think the Chiefs are willing to get into the fray there because they can draft somebody. If in that range of the draft, they can find a receiver. And I think this is going to be the part in the market.
Worthy. Yeah.
This is going to be the spot in the market to me that I'm most interested in. The top guys are going to get paid. We know this. Yep. But these guys who are $22 million a year receivers, are teams going to be willing to continue to shell out these sorts of contracts when you can pick A.D. Mitchell with this 32nd overall pick? Is that
you just saw what happened to Mike Williams too? He's making 20, and
that's exactly what I'm talking about. And his market, is that going to be a big
his
market?
Should be there, yeah. I mean,
he's the guy. Is there a way that with its incentive based, you can keep the number down? Does he make sense in Kansas City? Because he gives them that big body outside the numbers receiver. The speed isn't there. And I think that's the ingredient they lose when you swap him out for MVS. But that's one where I would be like, does that make sense for the right price? Because they need that sort of skill set in their offense, even if the juice isn't necessarily there.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense too. And it just, everything I've heard from KC is like, obviously, if you know anything about football and you watch football, like you saw the issue for the Chiefs last year was the separation issue, right? Like there was none. Everyone started to play man-to-man coverage against him. Kelsey really wasn't himself till the end of the year and got into the playoffs. MVS wasn't winning. Rashee Rice was the only receiver that was winning in man-to-man, and that's a rookie. And so I think, look, I love the Mike Williams thing. I just don't know if he makes fit for KC because they just look like they are like over the top about speed and separation, and like Mahomes can take literally a 9-step like drop out of gun by time, and that was their biggest issue. So it will be interesting to see. That's why I said Calvin. I know they can't get their APY probably, but like a guy like that, like a shifty speed guy, veteran guy, true number one. That's what they've missed. Now I guess they don't need it because they won another freaking Super Bowl. But that's going to be addressed probably in the draft. But the Calvin going back to Jacksonville. I mean, you got some weapons now for Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I like what they've done. I think it makes sense. They didn't really pay Gabe Davis anything. If Gabe Davis's main role is just popping him outside the numbers and letting you use Calvin Ridley the way that you want to, I like that. My favorite thing about the Calvin Ridley saga is that Jonathan Jones from the CBS this morning tweeted that he may be back with the Jags, even if the deal is similar when you consider taxes and cost of living, as if you need to care about cost of living when you're making $20 million a year.
No taxes, though. That's a real thing.
Taxes is real, but
there's 8 states with NFL teams that don't have taxable income. So like I would try to
I get that. And I'm sure cost of living in Jacksonville is very reasonable, but this idea that what him searching on Redfin is helping him make a decision when he's making $20 million a year is very funny.
Are you a Redfin guy? Are you a Redfin guy?
I am now. Not
Zillow, not Realtor.com.
I don't know why I went with the Redfin. That's what we started when we were looking at houses. And now when I'm I'm just pining for homes in different areas. That's my the Redfin alert I have for Denver, Colorado, or other places in the country that I'll just peruse every once in a while. It's mostly like ambition now.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I like realtor.com because we moved a lot. I use realtor.com, but the Zillow is interesting to me because it gives you that Zestimate. It's never right. But like, like, oh, my house is worth this much. Like, well, maybe
I try to avoid that.
Yeah.
I don't like to ride the wave.
Gives you false hope.
Let's talk about some of the other big dominoes yet to fall. We talked about Mike Williams. I think a huge question about what's going to happen with the other Chargers guys. Khalil Mack back on a revised deal.
Yeah,
that always made sense.
Have we heard anything on what that looks like? I mean,
we have not heard anything about the money there. But if I'm looking at, God, my dog is driving me crazy. This is the perils of live recording.
I love it. I love it. People love to see your life.
I really don't think they do. The 4 people that that had decisions to be made on the Chargers was Mike Williams, Khalil Mack, Keenan Allen, Joey Bosa. I talked about this with Daniel Popper, our Chargers writer, a bunch over the last couple months. The ones I felt best about were Mike Williams getting released and Keenan Allen being back with the Chargers. And I think that probably will happen. He's a lifer. He had a really good season last year. He's got such a good connection with Justin Herbert. So those I felt good about. I wasn't sure what was going to happen with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. So the fact that Mack is back, now I wonder what is actually going to happen with Joey Bosa and whether or not he ends up getting traded.
Look, they're cap compliant right now, so they need no other moves. And quite honestly, this Khalil Mack deal, when it comes out, we'll see it, the restructure or whatever it is, revised deal. Maybe they tore it up, maybe they didn't. Probably saved them some cap space. But I mean, I just think I felt like Mike was probably the one to go, being on the squad for the last 2 years, really in the past. Just his knee and the injury issue, and he's played 17 games since the 2021-2022 season, so that's an issue. Obviously, the Keenan Allen, I didn't even think about it because I just know how Justin feels about him, and I think that was a huge driving factor. Like, Justin got to bring back his quarterback coach, Shane Day, which he loved, which was fired. He was fired and shouldn't have been fired, but was fired. And he brought it, he was like, that's a Justin move, 100%. And this Keenan Allen, you can't let go of a guy like Keenan Allen. Now, the Joey Bosa thing, I just have a hard time. I get that you have to be cap compliant. I get that you still have to have room to sign draft picks. I get that you still need, they got Gus Edwards at a really good deal, but I have a hard time if I'm the new GM or really head coach. I know you want to put your stamp on it, getting rid of really good players. I understand the issue, and unless someone's going to trade and give you some good return on investment, and you're just going to start young and you're going to blow the whole thing up. But if you can find somehow, like Joey's still got a lot of gas in the tank, man, and he's one of the top pass rushers in the league. So I just have a hard time. I get it. You can play GM, all that. I just think in general, good teams keep around good players. And I think Joey is one of those. And who knows what's going to happen because they are cap compliant. New league year starts in 13 minutes. We'll see if anything comes out then. But I do like them trying to keep some of these guys. If you can build around Rashawn Slater, Khalil Mack, Mike Williams, Justin Herbert, Joey Bosa, all these guys, I think it makes sense. Now, he does have a huge cap hit, and I'm wondering if they're trying to work on a revised deal like Khalil. But I'm glad Khalil stayed as well because honestly, he's become one of the leaders in the locker room the last 2 or 3 years.
So that was the other question I was going to ask you. Personality-wise, Joey's a different kind of guy, right? And now you have Jim Harbaugh coming in there. Do you think that there's something there potentially just about him being one of the highest paid players on your roster, him just being a different sort of presence? I don't know him very well, but just the things I've heard and just personality-wise, just what he brings. Do you think that is a potential consideration how the Chargers would take care of this or approach it?
It shouldn't. It shouldn't, because you're allowed to be whoever the hell you want to be. And to be honest with you, he's not that weird. He's a little bit different in terms of communication and just fun, but I don't think Harbaugh. Yeah. I don't think Harbaugh is, I don't know. Look, that's what I wrestle with the Chargers is when you have to blow things up front office and you hire a new head coach, like a lot of these times, these GMs and these head coaches want to come in and put their stamp on the team and change the team. So is it a fire sale? I don't know. It didn't look like it. Like, I get the Mike Williams thing. Like, I heard that they want to try to bring him back. I just don't know about the type of money. Like, he's going to have a big market, but wouldn't that be something? If there's not the market that he hopes and you're able to get him on a really team-friendly deal, incentivize him, like stuff like that, like, who knows? They could be keeping the band together. We just don't know anything. That's why I like this time of the year. It's like, well, the Chargers are a big team, a big focus, especially with the new head coach. It's like, what are they going to do?
If you can get Mac, so Mac is a $38 million cap right now. Keenan Allen's at 34. If you tweaked both of those contracts, let's say you get those cap hits to $20 million each, that's $30 million in cap savings. You would save another $14 million if you traded Joey Bosa. I mean, you're in decent shape if you end up doing all of those
45 million.
Yeah, we'll see what ends up happening there. But again, like you said, they don't need to do anything, but it still feels like there are a couple things
There's probably something
with how they're going to approach those numbers.
Yeah.
Other big name guys left on the board here. I'm wondering when the tackles start coming off. The tackles have not really been moved at all. Tyron Smith, Trent Brown, guys like Jonah Williams, they're all still available. I wonder if that is a result of how strong the tackle draft class seems to be, where teams aren't necessarily feeling a huge push or a huge squeeze to get these guys right now because they can get them in the draft. But none of those guys have landed anywhere. And now we've got a couple third contract defensive linemen that I'm curious about. DJ Reader reportedly visiting the Lions, according to Mike Garafolo. Like that a lot. Where is Eric Armstead going to end up? Some rumors about the Texans potentially being a landing spot. Now they've traded Malik Collins. Detroit, another team. Could he land with a team like Cincinnati? So these kind of guys who, again, maybe a little bit closer to 30 on their third deals, but are still impactful players. Those are the guys that we're going to see come off the board next, and I'm curious where some of them land.
Well, and you might have put it in the rundown I'm looking at, but like, what about Justin Simmons? Like
forgot about Justin Simmons. Yep.
Justin Simmons, to me, like playing in that division for a long time, he's a G, man. He is an absolute baller. Like, I heard that the Eagles they were originally going after him. Now reports are saying, they're sort of out of it.
They signed CJ Gardner-Johnson.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you've seen Howie though. Like, Howie can, fit some money in there. And it will be interesting to just see where he goes, because to me, he's like one of the, if not the top safety in the league. Like, that's how I feel about him, watching him. Like, maybe he's lost a step in coverage. He's not a man cover guy anyway. He's a quarter safety that'll come in and bust you in the mouth. Like, that's what he is. He's a leader. He's an amazing locker room guy. It'll be interesting to see where he lands, but not only where he lands, how much he signs for.
Yeah, I agree. And the safety market, we'll see. Obviously, Xavier McKinney got that big deal, but Huge. Xavier McKinney's much younger. Xavier McKinney's only 24, and what he's shown over the last couple of years. Our team's looking at it, Justin Simmons, and just saying, he's 30. We can skimp on that position compared to others. For the most part, the safety market in general over the last couple of years has been pretty depressed. And you got to wonder if Justin Simmons is going to be one of the victims of that.
I don't know, man. I hope he signs for something, because it was a surprise. Like, I was on a trip. So this world is so small. I was on a trip to Guatemala with my son. That's why we didn't do a show last year. We did a mission trip with Compassion International. Anyway, there's a bunch of NFL guys down there. Nate Solder was down there. Colt McCoy was down there. And we had the chaplain from the Denver Broncos. And he's very close with Justin, because Justin's a Christian. And he was like, dude, this can, like, when the news broke, like day 2 or day 3, and he was texting him back and forth. He's like, he was completely blindsided by this.
Really?
Like, had no clue at all, like, really tough, because what he brings, this is from the chaplain, like what he brings to the locker room and to the younger guys.
He's an all-time guy, like all-time guy.
So look, I get they're trying to save money, but at the end of the day, it's a business, but these dudes are players too. So you got to recognize that.
Few other smaller moves today that are worth touching on. The Jets traded for Morgan Moses, the Baltimore Ravens right tackle, over the last couple of years. 4th-round pick swap of about 20 picks plus a 6th for Baltimore, and he's only making $5.5 million this year. And he was on the Jets a couple of years ago. They probably should have just kept him when he was there a couple of years ago, but they rectify that now. And if you look at what the Jets have done along their offensive line, now you have John Simpson, formerly of the Ravens, at left guard. You've got Joe Tippmann potentially moving to center, which I think makes the most sense. It's where he played in college. It was a 2nd-round pick last year. AVT now is allowed to play guard instead of tackle with Morgan Moses coming in.
Moses
and picking
right
10th,
tackle.
You're in a position to draft a left tackle. So now when you think about how much of a disaster that group was last year, you're at least going to potentially go into the season with a lot more certainty and a lot more stability up front than you had last year when Dwayne Brown and Mekhi Becton were your two best answers at tackle, both of whom just couldn't stay healthy over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, look, you spend all this money and all these players and all this capital on Aaron Rodgers, right? If you can't keep your quarterback upright, and we saw the disaster sort of that offensive line was last year. I mean, it makes sense to me, especially at $5.5 million. I mean, that's what you said he was making. It's insane. I mean, the tackle, you're going to get a legitimate left tackle at 10 for the next decade. You're not going to have to worry about him. And it's going to be Aaron Rodgers' best friend for 1, 2, or 3 years, unless he runs for VP, like you say. And I don't know, all that stuff. It's wild to me.
Yeah,
but,
you typically opposing pass rushes were the real problem for the Jets offense last year. This year it might be RFK, which I did not necessarily expect, but this is where we've landed.
Unbelievable.
My looming question here with this trade, though, is now what happens with Baltimore. So now Baltimore's lost 2 of their starters in free agency or just via transaction. They moved on from Kevin Zeitler. Patrick McCarry's still on the roster. Does he get moved to right tackle? What does that mean for their 2 guard spots? So Baltimore's offensive line was a strength over the last couple of years, I think. And now, even after restructuring Ronnie Stanley's deal to make sure he's intact as their left tackle, I still think there are a lot of questions about how Baltimore is going to approach that position group here over the next couple months.
Well, not even that position group, the whole team. I mean, they lost 10 guys: Patrick Queen, Geno Stone, Morgan Moses, John Simpson, Gus Edwards, Ronald Darby, Tyus Bowser, Devin Duvernay, Deshaun Phillips, Tyler Ott, which is long snapper. We love talking about long snappers on this show. So like they lost some key pieces. Now they added Derrick Henry, which I love. He fits Baltimore. He's great for it. But if you have Derrick Henry, you don't have anyone really up front to block. Like that's an issue to me.
A couple other smaller moves. The Niners traded for Malik Collins. Like that a lot. Obviously, there's some scheme familiarity there with him being with the Texans over the last couple seasons. The Texans saving a little bit of money there as they make some more splashy moves. And that makes both sense for both sides. And then the other one I think that's worth noting is the Rams put a 2nd-round tender on Alaric Jackson, who was their left tackle last year. So that is a pretty good indication that he's going to be back. So now their offensive line goes Alaric Jackson, Jonah Jackson, Steve Avila at center now, Kevin Dotson, and Rob Havenstein. That is a group that I think you can easily get excited about. There's a lot of physicality there. And at least the way the Rams offense played last season, I think some indications that they're going to be able to carry over a lot of that success with this group.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, these are the moves that, these smaller moves we're talking about that don't get a lot of fanfare. They just want the big names and the big money. But these, few and far between, are those huge, massive $100 million deals, right? $60 million deals.
And rarely do those really move the needle when it comes down to it.
It's that like middle class to lower level free agency signing that you can get a teamer, like a special teamer, for $2 million a year, and you're like, man, this is going to change the face of a 4-core unit in our team. So all this stuff is awesome. It's like head spinning for everyone. And I think Diana at The Athletic obviously has done such an amazing job this week. She's been on top of everything and every move, from Kirk Cousins to who knows like what the next move is. She's got her ear on the ground. So it's awesome to see that. But all these teams and all these moves, they make a lot of sense, because that's how you build some of these teams with new coaches. You can't always draft a guy. Like this middle level of free agency is a big deal. Because I was a part of it for a lot of times, and you're like, okay, yeah, you're not the top of the top, but we still need somebody. We need our core. This is how the core gets built. Jordan
Poyer is the other one that we haven't mentioned on the show at all. Him going to Miami, I think that makes a lot of sense when you consider the scheme that the Dolphins are going to be running. Yep. Yeah, that's right. That's right. He's from there, spends time down there. So again, if you're having to skimp a little bit because of where you are financially, the Tua contract is coming, I think that one makes a lot of sense as well. But that's about all we've got today. Yeah. We'll be back tomorrow with Nate to essentially wrap up the rest of these. Slight tweak to the schedule this week. We are not going to have a show on Friday afternoon. Instead, we're just going to let the football GM guys take care of that on Saturday, but we will have another one coming your way on Monday. So be back here tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern for our last live show, and then football GM on Saturday, and then we'll be back in the feed on Monday. So just pay attention to that. Other thing to mention, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're discovering us on YouTube, please subscribe to our podcast. Yes. you can click on the description below, the link below in the description of the video. That's where you can subscribe. If you want to go to your favorite podcast app, find the Athletic Football Show. We would love it if you did that. So please take note of that. Please be mindful of that. That's all we have today. Sincerely appreciate you guys listening. We'll be back later.